For 8 years Dean Martin kept a perfect secret. Every Christmas Eve, same thing. He'd tell his family he had something to do. They thought he was going to parties, hanging out with women, living the usual Dean Martin life. But Dean wasn't at any parties. He was going somewhere else. Somewhere nobody would ever think to look for him. Doing something that would surprise everyone who thought they knew him. Years nobody knew until Christmas Eve, 1972, when a newspaper reporter happened to look a little too hard and Dean Martin's secret was about to be in all the newspapers. To understand why Dean's secret was so surprising, you need to understand what everyone thought they knew about Dean Martin in 1972. Dean Martin was the ultimate playboy, the cool single guy who went on dates with models and actresses, who threw amazing parties, who lived the fancy life. This wasn't just rumors. This was Dean's carefully built public image. The Dean Martin Show was one of the biggest shows on TV. Every week, 20 million people watched Dean perform with beautiful women, make jokes about drinking, and act like nothing in life was serious. Dean played a character. The fun-loving guy who partied, who didn't worry about anything, who lived for fun. The celebrity magazines made this image even stronger. Photos of Dean at nightclubs, Dean with different women, Dean living big in Beverly Hills. And Dean never told them they were wrong, never said anything different. He let the world believe he was exactly what he seemed to be: shallow, fun, simple. By Christmas 1972, Dean was 55 years old, divorced twice, living alone in his Beverly Hills mansion. No wife, no girlfriend right then. So naturally everyone thought Dean would spend Christmas Eve at some cool party, the Playboy Mansion maybe, or throwing his own party. The Los Angeles Times even printed a story that week: Hollywood's most eligible bachelor, how Dean Martin spends the holidays. The article guessed about Dean's Christmas plans: parties, beautiful women, champagne, the usual Dean Martin glamour. But nobody knew the truth, because Dean Martin was really good at keeping secret. The truth started in 1964, 8 years before that Christmas Eve in 1972. Dean's son, Dean Paul Dino, was 13 years old, and Dino had asked his father a question that changed everything. It was mid-December 1964. Dean was home for a rare evening. Dino came up to him. "Dad, what are you doing on Christmas Eve?" Dean shrugged. "Not sure yet." "Why?" "My school is organizing volunteers to serve dinner at a homeless shelter, St. Vincent's downtown. Signed up. I thought maybe you could come with me." Dean's first thought was to say no. A homeless shelter on Christmas Eve. That wasn't his thing. But then Dean looked at his son. Dino wanted to spend time with him. Wanted Dean to be there. Yeah. "Okay, I'll come." December 24th, 1964. Dean and Dino drove to St. Vincent Shelter in downtown Los Angeles. Dean had never been to that part of the city. Hadn't seen real poverty up close in years. The shelter was beat up, an old warehouse they'd fixed up, long tables set up, volunteers making food, and homeless people, maybe 250 of them, lined up outside waiting for dinner. Dean and Dino spent 4 hours there, setting up tables, serving food, talking to the homeless people who came through the line. And something happened to Dean that night, something he didn't expect. He talked to a man named William, late 60s, veteran, living on the street for 3 years. William had fought in World War II, served his country, and now he was homeless, forgotten. Dean served William mashed potatoes. They talked for maybe 2 minutes about the war, about life, about Christmas. When William moved on, He turned back to Dean. Thank you, sir. You just made my Christmas. Those words really affected Dean. The man who had nothing, who was living on the streets, was thanking Dean for mashed potatoes, for 2 minutes of talking, for being treated like a human being. Dean finished the shift without saying much. On the drive home, Dino asked, "Dad, you okay?" Dean nodded. "Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking." That night Dean couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about William, about the other homeless people he'd met, about how little it took to make someone's day better, a plate of food, a kind word, being treated with respect. Dean had everything. Millions of dollars, a mansion, fame, success, and these people had nothing. But they weren't asking for millions. They just wanted a meal, some respect, someone to notice them. Dean made a decision that night. I'm going back next year. Christmas Eve 1965. Dean told his family he had something to take care of. They thought he was going to a party. But Dean drove to St. Vincent's shelter alone this time. He wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, not because he was trying to hide, but because he didn't want this to become about him. Didn't want photographers. Didn't want publicity. Dean served food for 4 hours, talked to homeless people, helped clean up, then left. Never told anyone. Christmas Eve 1966. Same thing. Baseball cap, sunglasses, 4 hours at St. Vincent's, then home. Christmas Eve 1967. Again. 1968. Again, and so on. Every single year. Same thing. Dean would tell his family he had something to do. His kids thought he was at parties. His friends thought he was with women. Nobody questioned it. Because Dean Martin was Dean Martin. Hard to predict, did his own thing. But Dean wasn't partying. He was serving mashed potatoes at a homeless shelter. And he'd kept this secret perfectly for 8 years. The volunteers at St. Vincent's knew there was a regular guy who showed up every Christmas Eve. Quiet, hardworking, nice. They called him Dan. He always wore a cap and sunglasses. Never talked about himself. Just showed up, worked hard, and left. They had no idea he was Dean Martin. Until Christmas Eve 1972. Michael Sanders was having the worst Christmas Eve of his life. He was 26 years old, junior reporter at the Los Angeles Times, and he'd been told to work Christmas Eve. While everyone else was home with family, Michael was covering human interest stories, feel-good pieces about charity and volunteers. His editor had given him a list. Hit a few shelters, get some quotes, write something heartwarming. 500 words, due by midnight. Michael's first stop was St. Vincent's. He arrived around 6 p.m. The place was packed. Long lines of homeless people, volunteers serving food. Michael started doing his job, taking notes, interviewing volunteers, getting quotes for his article. Then he noticed something weird. One of the volunteers, a man serving mashed potatoes, was wearing a baseball cap pulled way down over his face. Sunglasses, even though they were indoors, even though it was evening. Michael's reporter instincts kicked in. Why is someone hiding their face? Is this a celebrity doing court-ordered community service? Politician getting photos for his campaign. Michael moved closer, watched the man work, the way he moved, the way he talked to people in line, something familiar. Then the man laughed, a special kind of laugh, and Michael froze. That laugh. Michael knew that laugh. He'd heard it 1,000 times on TV, on records. Michael moved even closer, studied the man's face. Despite the cap and sunglasses, Michael could see enough. That's Dean Martin. Michael's heart started racing. Dean Martin. Dean Martin. Serving mashed potatoes at a homeless shelter on Christmas Eve. Michael walked over, stood right behind Dean and said, "Mr. Martin." Dean froze, his hand still holding the serving spoon. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly Dean turned. He looked at Michael at the press badge hanging around his neck, and Dean knew. The secret's over. "Yeah," Dean said quietly. "That's me." Michael was shocked. "What are you doing here?" Dean looked at the line of homeless people, at the mashed potatoes, at the reporter staring at him. "Serving dinner, same as everyone else here." "But you're Dean Martin. Why are you?" "Same reason as everyone else? Christmas. These people need a meal, so we help." Michael pulled out his notepad. "Mr. Martin, can I ask you some questions?" Dean looked uncomfortable. "Look, I'd rather you didn't write about this." "Why not? This is an incredible story." Dean Martin secretly volunteering at a homeless shelter. That's why the word secretly. I've been coming here for 8 years. Nobody knew. I wanted it that way. This isn't about publicity. Not a photo op. I come here. Serve food. I go home. That's it. Michael wasn't sure what to do. As a reporter, this was amazing front page material, but he could see Dean was serious. This wasn't a publicity stunt. "Mr. Martin, people should know about this. You're doing something good. Why hide it?" Dean sighed, set down the serving spoon, looked directly at Michael. "You want to know why I'm here? My father was a barber in Steubenville, Ohio. Immigrant. Worked 6 days a week. Cutting hair. We weren't poor, but we weren't rich. And when I was 7 years old, Christmas Eve 1924, my father took me to a shelter, made me serve food to homeless people. I didn't want to. I wanted to go home and open presents, but my father said, 'Dino, we got enough. These people don't, so we help.' I've never forgotten that. Every Christmas I remember I got enough. These people don't. So I help." Dean paused. "I don't do this for credit. I don't do it so people will think I'm a good guy. I do it because it's the right thing to do. And the moment it becomes about publicity, it stops being about helping. It becomes about me. And that's not the point." Michael was writing as fast as he could. "That's beautiful, Mr. Martin, but people would respect you more if they knew. I don't need people to respect me more. I'm doing fine. But if you write this story next year, this place will be full of photographers. Other celebrities will show up looking for good press. And it won't be about the homeless people anymore. It'll be about the celebrities and these people." Dean pointed to the line. "They deserve better than that." Michael looked at his notepad, at Dean, at the homeless people waiting for food. "Mr. Martin, what if I write the story but don't publish it until after Christmas? Give you this year, but let people know what you're doing." Dean thought about it. "If you write it, you can't make it about me. Make it about this place, about the people who come here, about the volunteers who've been doing this for years. I'm just one guy serving potatoes." Michael nodded. "Deal." Dean held out his hand. They shook and Dean went back to serving mashed potatoes. Michael stayed for another hour, watching, taking notes. He talked to other volunteers, to homeless people, to the shelter director. Everyone had the same reaction when Michael told them that mashed potato guy was Dean Martin. "Dan is Dean Martin." The shelter director was shocked. "He's been coming for 8 years. Never told us who he was. Just showed up, worked hard, and left. We had no idea." Michael's article ran in the Los Angeles Times on December 27, 1972. Front page. The headline, "The Secret Life of Dean Martin, 8 years of anonymous charity. The article told about Dean's 8 years of volunteering, his father's lesson, his ideas about helping without publicity, and it made Dean look like a completely different person than the playboy the world thought they knew. The response was huge. Thousands of letters to the Times, to Dean, to St. Vincent shelter. People were shocked, touched, inspired. Dean never talked about it publicly, never gave interviews about. When reporters asked, Dean would say, "I just serve potatoes, that's all." But something did change. Other celebrities started volunteering, not for publicity but for real, quietly. Following Dean's example, St. Vincent's shelter got a ton of donations, enough to grow bigger, to serve more people, to help more homeless people get back on their feet. Dean continued volunteering every Christmas, even till 1994, his final year. He was 77 years old. Sick, weak, but he showed up, served food, kept the tradition. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, 1 year and 1 day after his final volunteer shift. At his funeral, the director of St. Vincent's shelter spoke. He told the story of Dan, the mysterious volunteer who'd shown up every Christmas for 30 years, who'd never wanted credit, who just helped. The lesson of Dean Martin's secret isn't about charity. It's about being humble, about doing good without wanting recognition, about the difference between helping because it's right and helping because you want credit. Dean could have told everyone about his volunteering from day one, could have gotten tons of positive press, could have changed his entire image, but he didn't, because that would have made it about him. And it wasn't about him. It was about the homeless people who needed a meal, who needed to be seen, who needed to be treated with respect. We got enough. These people don't, so we help. That was Dean Martin's father's lesson. And Dean lived it for 30 years in secret until a reporter stumbled onto the truth. Even then, Dean didn't change. He'd kept serving, kept helping, kept showing up. That's who Dean Martin really was. Not the playboy, not the drunk, not the shallow entertainer, but a man who remembered where he came from, who followed his father's lesson, who helped people who had nothing every Christmas Eve for 30 years in secret until he couldn't anymore.